So what we're going to have to do, I think, is we're not going to be able to reuse that piece of wrought ironwork for this part of the model. We're going to have the same problem though in the main stairwell, because if I go out of isolation mode and we look at our main stairs at the very front here, I want to add wrought iron to this as well. Actually, these ones already have some wrought iron created, so looks like in the original version here I did that. I left it as it was, again because I was more concerned with pardon me, with texture sizes and polygon counts here. So I did actually leave it in that pattern like that. That's not great though. When a designer put these stairs together, they wouldn't really do that. You wouldn't leave a little gap in there like that. You would make the wrought iron go all the way up to the top of the rail. And while it's not terrible, it's not correct either. Again, I did it this way back in 2011 to save on poly counts and texture memory. But I think it's probably better if we do it the right way. So as we're updating all of these, we may as well do it the right way. What I need to do though is find that asset that we imported into Unreal, that one section, that small wrought iron section. Where did I put it? I think I put it here. Okay. I think it's this one. Object 5, what's this one? Object 12. Pretty sure it's this one, and we did this, I know that because it's a multi-material. We did that so we had gold in the middle and wrought iron on the outside. Let's jump into the top view and take one of these. When I say take, I'm just holding down the shift key and shift dragging a copy. We'll pull it all the way over where our stairs are, which are around here, I think. Yep. Okay, let's select those and isolate them again so we're less confused with everything else going on around and the outside. And let's adjust one of these pieces so that they'll fit. Now, originally, like I said, the original model had it so that there was a bit of a gap left between the top and the rail. And I don't like that. I want to change that. So I'm going to start by scaling up this. Actually, before I scale it up, I've got to make sure it's positioned correctly. I'll jump into my top view. We'll make sure it's actually inside the railing. It doesn't really matter where here because we're going to be recreating it in Unreal anyway. Rebuilding it in a blueprint. But I do want to make sure it's positioned above that and that so that I can get the alignment correct. We'll start by doing a scale in the Y direction like we did in Unreal with the original piece until they intersect. Okay. Let's select these curved pieces. Again, I'm just in sub-object mode doing this. Just going to go into wireframe really quickly so I can get this one here. Okay, we'll go back into shaded. Actually, I want to go into constant colors. It'll just stop any shadowing from getting in the way. I'm going to scale these ones back. Okay. See, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull them down. Because I want those swirls to stay outside of the railing section itself. I'm not so concerned about the decorative pieces here on the bottom. We could skew it as well, actually, but I won't. What we could actually do is skew the entire piece of geometry on an angle. I'm wondering if that would that would look odd. We could skew a rectangle to look like that. So instead of looking like that, we could skew it in Max to look like that. But that's going to skew all of the these decorative pieces as well, and that's going to look odd. These really should not be skewed. They should be straight. So what we're going to do here is go back into vertex mode. I'm going to go back to, where are we? Preserve UVs, because I don't want to alter my UV shell. But I don't want this sticking through the top either. So I'm going to pull that in. I don't have to worry about the bottom because it's being hidden by the stairs. Alright, so all of this in here is being hidden by the stairs, and then the top is being hidden by the railing section itself. So I don't have to skew the bottom, only the top. You could skew the bottom if you wanted to, but it's unnecessary. Alright, now if I've chosen the right piece, we should be able to export this. I'm going to call this stairs ironwork. And we'll export it. Come on, Max. I'll create a new folder for it as well, I think. Again, keep it all nice and organized. What's it warning about me here? Non-associated to make one or more of the opposite in the scene axis, not perpendicular to the other. Let's do a reset on the X form, and we're also going to make sure that our axis is in the middle. Before we do a collapse, let's try doing an export again now. It's just warning me about some of my materials not being correct, and that's because we're just using a plain material in Max. We don't have a texture assigned to it. Let's jump back into Unreal. Let's import that model. And it's just a warning about smoothing groups because we don't have any smoothing groups. Okay, I just want to check this now. Okay. It has no texture assigned to it because we didn't assign one in Max, but what I want to try and do here, I think, is find out what this is using. Okay. Jump into my materials that we have already created. Before I do that, I've got to open up that object again. Okay, now into our materials, and I want to throw this material on. Okay, and it's picked up our materials, our gold material and our wrought iron, so that's fine. Save that. We're going to remove this one here. We're going to drag in that new one we just created. Again, we're going to rotate it 90 degrees this way. Make sure I turn my snapping back on again. So I can get a true 90 degree turn. Alright, let's jump into our top viewport. Position it again. Back into our orthographic. Okay, and now we can get a piece that looks more natural in that spot. I'm just going to right click and go edit and duplicate so that we're not creating more polys or texture memory, we're just duplicating it. So it's read into memory once and reused in the engine. And now we just have to line these up correctly. Just going to deselect that for a moment. I think that will be okay. We have a bit of a gap here and a bit of a gap here, but the two in the middle are actually joined together. So now we can select both of them. And again, we can go duplicate, edit, duplicate. Line them up and pull them down. And we'll go edit, duplicate again. And now what this will give us is, aside from the fact that this will look more interesting for a railing section, as opposed to having all of these type of rails in there, it'll probably end up costing us less in poly count as well, because unlike the original mesh here, where all of these are unique, they're not instanced. Because we're instancing all of this geometry through the middle, we're probably going to find out that the actual overall poly count will be less anyway than if we had all of these straight sections in here, like that one, all the way through in the original model. So instancing your geometry, even though we're using a piece of a mesh here that's much higher polygon than that, in the end will probably work out to be lower polygon overall because it's being instanced more than the original mesh, if that makes sense. So even though you think adding all this extra geometry into this wrought iron work would actually increase your poly count for this stair rail, you'll probably find it'll actually end up decreasing the overall poly count for that stair rail, because we're doing away with a lot of these sections that we can't instance, these straight sections here. So we just have to do one more duplicate and pull it down into place. We'll deselect everything and check it over. So now we have our railing section here, and again, like I said, the wrought iron just helps to give a bit more interest to the railing, to the stairwell railing, as opposed to having all of these, just these straight normal sections here running all the way through. But now we have an object here that if we want to move around, it's going to be a pain. So what we're going to do is we're going to select everything again. So we have our entire object selected. We're going to go up to our blueprints and we're going to convert selected components to a blueprint class. We're going to select where we wanted to put it, and that's in a blueprints folder I've created. We're going to call it stairs back. Instead of blueprint, we're calling it prefab. So create the blueprint. And now we have our railing section already attached and ready to go as one object when we want to place it in our level. So again, you can see our prefab over here in the corner. So once I have my building imported and I want to place this railing section, I just have to drag that in and it's going to be all ready to go. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to fiddle around repositioning pieces of geometry that we've instanced. Okay. So blueprints, like I said, are not only really good in Unreal for creating, if you need to do anything programmatically, like having an opening and closing door or a sliding door. A lot of people think blueprints are only good for that, but they're good just to use them as a prefab, to create a prefab for your object, to make moving things around much easier in the level. All right, let's just do a save all here. And let's jump back into Max. I'm so used to using my mouse to rotate in Unreal, I keep forgetting Max you actually have to go into your rotate tool. And again, I have a button on my mouse set up so I can go into that automatically, but I like to show you guys what I'm doing when I'm doing it. So my mouse, I always hit the button when I'm streaming, so you know what I'm doing. Let's just go out of isolation mode here. All right, we can move these sections now into the background because we've finished working on them. I'm going out of sub-object mode here. Remember, once we're finished working on an object, we just move it into the background here so that we know that we're done with it. All right. Now, we're nearly finished with these fiddly little sections of railing and stuff. There's one more I want to do, though, which is I want to add some wrought iron work into a couple of sections so we don't just have a railing section like this, which is all rail. I do want some like that, because it'll give me a few options when I come to design the interior of the building. But I also want a couple that have some wrought iron work in the middle. So what I'm going to do, I think, with this one is I'm going to do wrought iron here and wrought iron here with one of those in the middle. And with this one down the bottom, I'm going to do one here with wrought iron in the center. So wrought iron on either end and wrought iron in the middle. So we're going to have two more sections that we can play with in Unreal, two more assets or props or whatever you want to call them, of railing sections that we can work with, just depending on the area we're working in and how we want it to look. A similar way we did with the square base and the top column here as being two separate objects. We can remove them and use them on their own or use them together. Just gives us more options. So what we need to do for that again is I can use the one in Unreal I've already created, the wrought iron, where are we? That we've already made, the square wrought iron piece, which is this one here. So we don't have to worry about repositioning or vertex manipulating or moving another piece. All we have to do is remove the pieces we don't want here. So I'm just looking at, so we did retexture it, so it should be okay. It's still going to be using 3 textures. This is the old texture here on the top. You see how bad that is? It's really low quality. And the new one that we created when we painted them up in Substance Painter, it has a lot more detail to it. It's actually the cherry wood. We want to use that cherry wood on this, but I don't want to repaint this in... I was going to say I don't really want to repaint it in Substance Painter. We may have to though, because it's actually UV mapped specifically to the object. I don't think we can reuse any of these pieces to shortcut it. That one has 4. We can reuse this one actually, but this one, because it has 5, will probably need to be done uniquely. Or we may be able to get away with using doing it in Max instead of jumping into Substance Painter. I know I'm jumping around here, it sounds a bit confusing. I'll explain it to you in a little bit more detail in just a second. I'm going to take a quick break for a couple of minutes while I grab a fresh cup of coffee. So I will be back in just a few minutes. I'll leave you with my Be Right Back screen while I go to the machine and grab a new cup of coffee. I'll be back in just a few minutes, guys. Okay. So let's see if I can explain what I mean here. Checking my OBS here. Alright, so we have this piece of geometry here that we have to convert, that I want to add some wrought iron work to make a different asset. But this is using the old texture here. I can't just swap that texture for one of these sections we've already created, because that's UV mapped specifically to that object. So what I can do though is take one of these pieces. I'm just going to pull it out so I can see it a bit better. has 4, which is the same as the one down the bottom here, which has 4. The actual texture itself, geometry itself should be identical. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shift drag a copy over. I'm going to pull it forward. Remember, we're not concerned with the column here because we've already exported one of these columns in Unreal that we can use on its own when we need that to rebuild the level. So we're not worrying about the column. So I'm going to start by removing the column on the end. I'll just delete it. Okay, so now we have these two pieces of geometry. It's probably easier to see the texture difference in the top viewport. This is the one that's been textured up in Substance Painter. This is the old one, which has a bit of a stretch texture happening on it and a low quality texture as well. Let's move the one we've already textured in place here. Now there is a difference here in that this one is rotated 180 degrees, so let's do the same for this one. It's rotated 180 degrees. And that's because the decorative piece at the back has to be facing in the correct direction to match the one that we're replacing it with. But aside from that, the actual model itself is pretty much identical. It looks like the old one is a little shorter on the top here. The railing section itself may be a little bit shorter. That's really not going to matter though to us when we start rebuilding it in Unreal, because we can intersect it with a wall or we can intersect it with a column to make it the right length. So we don't really have to mess around with making sure that the length of that railing matches the length of this railing. Unless it was shorter, but because it's longer, it's going to be okay. We can get around it. Remember guys, if there's anything you're not sure about, I know it can be a bit hard to grasp here, please pop into chat and ask me. I'm happy to help if I can. If you just want to watch though, like I said, that's completely fine. So we don't have to alter the length of the railing here to match this one, because we can hide it when we start rebuilding the level, either inside a wall or inside a column. Okay, that's the first thing. I can't use this texture. I can't just export this and place this texture on that object in Unreal because it's UV mapped differently. It won't work. It won't UV map correctly. I've got to work with the one we've already made, which is what I'm going to do. So we've already exported this piece into Unreal, which is this one here. We're going to export another version which has the wrought iron work in the middle, and the easiest way to do that is going to be to go into sub-object mode. I'm just looking for a spot here that's easy for me to see. Selecting the two that we want to remove here in the middle. Remember the ones at the back and at the very top as well. We have a couple of some geometry here going on the top, so we have to make sure we select that as well. And the ones at the back. And down the bottom. Okay. So we have this one we've already exported. We want to make a different type of version of this so that we have a bit of variety when we come to rebuild the railings inside the building. So I'm going to delete those. And remember, this is a copy of the original that we have in the background still over here. All right, we've deleted those two, so let's re-export this, and we're going to call this one single rail iron for ironwork. Whoop. I'm just going to copy that. Let's export this asset. We may as well create a new folder for it. And it's actually small single rail iron is what we're calling it. Okay. We shouldn't need to do a reset on the X spawn because we haven't made any alterations to it apart from deleting some geometry. Alright, let's re-import that now into Unreal. Again, it's just a warning about smoothing groups. We don't have any smoothing groups, so that's not a problem. Okay, we do want to swap out our textures to make sure that they're correct. So I'm going to jump into my materials here and just ensure that we are using the materials we've already created. And that one will be, I think it's this one here. You saw when I changed our material here, we got our nice reflection happening again. That's because we've already created our material. We don't want to make a new one. So we have our piece here that has the ironwork missing. We're just going to do the same thing again. We're going to create a blueprint. So let's drag that piece of geometry and we just import it. Let's drag in one of our straight wrought iron pieces. Again, I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees. I'll jump into my top viewport to get my alignment correct. Alright, back into our orthographic. Now again, you see here with this piece of geometry, it's just a little bit too small. But we can use our scale command here now, so I'm just going to turn off snapping so I can get a bit more fine control over my scale. I'm just going to scale it up until it hits the top and the bottom. Okay, we can turn our snaps back on again. We're going to do the same thing and go edit and duplicate so that we're only using the geometry once and just replicating it in the engine, so we're using less memory and all that type of thing, less polys, less textures. And position it. And now again, you see I'm doing this positioning here by eye in the orthographic. I'm avoiding going into top view to get the positioning completely correct because I want them to be a little bit not exact. Again, that because I want it to look more natural. I don't want it to be exactly the same distance. If they're off a little bit, that just looks a bit more natural, a bit more realistic. The same thing we did when we were working with our straight sections here in Max, just angling them a bit to make them not quite so perfect. Not spaced exactly the same, not a couple of them were angled just slightly. Add a bit of imperfection to add realism. We're going to select those pieces now and we're going to create another blueprint. Place it in our blueprints folder, square rail ironwork underscore prefab. And again, we have our prefab made here that we can easily place in our level now. Alright, so we've done that one with some ironwork in the center. I think there's just one more that I want to do for that, and that's the one at the top here, which has 5. Now, I'm trying to work out if there's a way we can do this without having to jump back into Substance Painter. Just working with the assets we already have, and we probably can do it by using this one here. So I'm going to shift drag a copy over again. We're going to rotate it 90 degrees. I'll move it into position. And just so I don't get confused again, I'm going to move these ones into the background. Move that one up a bit. Right, now we want to use this piece of geometry because I don't want to have to go back into Substance Painter and paint the, even though it's a pretty quick job now that we created a smart material in Substance Painter, it's still a step that is we shouldn't probably need to do if we're careful. So let's work with what we've got as opposed to recreating it again. Now, what we're going to have to do here is we're going to have to separate our railings from our rails. So I'm going to select the bits that we want to keep, or that we want separate, which are the top to bottom. And I'm going to detach them. Now, I'm going to jump into my top viewport here. I'm going to scale these in until the width matches the one we're copying at the front here, the one we're replacing, I should say. If it's a little longer, it's not a problem. We don't want it to be shorter though. So again, it's a little bit longer, and I'm doing that on purpose. I'd rather it be a bit longer, that we could hide the ends, and a bit too short and we get stuck. So now we've made the old asset here the same size as the one that we're trying to make a copy of, one at the front. Let's work on the railing section now. What I'm going to do too is I'm going to go into isolation mode. Again, it's going to be easier for me to see. We'll jump into our left viewport. I'm going to move these into place here. And now I'm going to start removing some of them. I know I don't need these ones on the end, so they can go to begin with straight away. I'm pretty sure I don't need this one either. So that can go. So now we have it matching up, but we want to change it so we have some wrought iron work in here. And on this one I want wrought iron on the end and just one in the middle. So again, I'm going to remove the two on the end here and remove the two on the end here. Okay. Now all we have to do is reattach the pieces together. All right. And I'm going to call this one Small Rail Iron. Small Rail Ironwork. I want to make sure it's a different name but in the same grouping so I can understand what I'm doing here. Small Rail Ironwork. We'll call this one Small Rail Multi-Iron. That should I should know from that what it's going to be. Again, we shouldn't have to reset our X-form or anything like that. It should still be good from the original. Export selected. Create a new folder. Alright, jump back into Unreal. Let's import that model. It's complaining about a degenerate tangent base. So I think for this one I may actually do a reset on the X-form. I think the problem is we've altered the geometry too much that it's complaining when it brings it in. Again, I'm just going to make sure that my pivot is in the middle. If you make small adjustments to a mesh, you shouldn't need to do a reset on the X-form, but if you make large changes, like we've removed quite a few iron sections and we've actually scaled the model in as well, it's going to complain. So that's okay, we can just export it one more time. And just re-import it again. Again, you see it didn't give me any error messages now. So if you get an error message on an import of an FBX into Unreal about smoothing groups, and you know you're not using smoothing groups, I know I'm not, it's not a problem. You can ignore that message. If you get an error message regarding tangents not being level, that's a bit more concerning, and you probably should go back into the 3D program you're using and do some sort of reset for your X-form on the model. That'll generally fix it. It's called Reset X-form in Max. I'm not sure what Blender, what it's called in Blender, but I'm pretty sure all 3D programs should have some way for you to reset your bounds on your mesh. Basically, that's all a Reset X-form is doing. It's making sure that the axes is lined up correctly and that the bounds of the mesh are correct. So let's change our textures here, our substances, our materials, I should say. Again, we're going to swap that one for that one. You see that brought in our proper material. It's varnished. We're going to swap these two. We're doing this so that we're reusing the same materials. Save our changes. Okay, let's pull this new asset in. And again, we're going to pull in one of these small sections. Yeah, we will. One of the wrought iron sections, we'll do a rotate 90 degrees. Jump back into our top viewport to get the initial lineup correct. And once we've initially lined it up correctly underneath of the rail, we'll do the rest by eye in the orthographic. So we'll start by scaling it up, turning off snapping so we get more control. May scale it up just a touch more. That's better. We can turn snapping back on again now. And again, we're going to duplicate it. So edit duplicate. Move it into position. Now, I notice when I do a duplication, it tends to pop it just a little bit off center. So just going to jump back into the top viewport. You see what I mean here? It's just not completely in a line. I don't want that. I do want it to be lined up.